36-dimensional spaces. According to the level of the life mass energy of matters and antimatters, there are 36 dimensions in the spaces. They are colorless space, double color space, mortal world, cause-effect space, between yin and yang space, human celestial being space, proton space, photon space, light speed circle, super light space circle, molecule world, micro world, law world, retention information space, super time space, macro world, time tunnel, holographic order world, zero world, heaven world, Elysium world, cathode black hole body, 10,000-year world, 1,000-year world, dream world, anode black hole world, livestock world, animal world, plant world, insect world, bacteria world, landscape and climate world, hell world, frozen layer and inflamed world. 一维空间，无色间. One-dimensional space, colorless space. It is a space where we can't see the size, form, or color of the objects. Living in this space, we are just like the blind. The polar nights or the polarites belong to the colorless space. The Taiji space before the universe is born is a one-dimensional space. For the humans, the anti-world is a one-dimensional space. All the antimatters are one-dimensional in nature. That's why we can't see the consciousness, thinking, soul, Buddha, celestial being, Tao, law, heaven world, Elysium world, dream world, hell world, frozen layer or inflamed layer. From the perspective of the one-dimensional space of the antimatters, all of us human beings are the blind people. We can't see things in the space, just like the blind people who can't see the beautiful flowers and other things in this world. We see nothing and have on knowledge of the antimatter one-dimensional space. 二维空间，双色间, two-dimensional space, the double color space. In this space, the objects have sizes and forms, but they only have the light and shade colors. For instance, the achromatopsia people live in the double color space. The scenes in the hell world, frozen layer and inflamed layer, are just like the images in black and white TV with only light and shade colors. If one person judges things only by good and bad, true and false, good and evil, and beauty and ugly, instead of seeing the bad and the good and the bad, the false and the true and the false, the good and the evil and the good, the beauty and the ugly and the beauty, the static and the dynamic and the static, his thinking would be the achromatopsia thinking, and he actually lives in the two-dimensional world. The space which only has the direct lines without curves, and the direct lines have no obliquity from the perspective of either primary vision, overlook, or sectional view, is the two-dimensional space. Three-dimensional space, mortal world. In this space, substances have forms and sizes are rich in colors. The space is constantly changing. The mortal world is a three-dimensional space. 98% of the human population and most of the animals, except the birds, live in this space. The three-dimensional space is a knotless space. The movement of all matters is a knotless line, just like a rope fastened to a person's foot. No matter how many turns he or she makes, no matter which direction he or she goes, though the rope has many twists or pile into a geometric pattern, it will become a straight when we pull the two ends of it. And there is no knot in this line. The three-dimensional space is a relatively simple and v space. It is a space where we live without making efforts. 四维空间，因果间. Four-dimensional space, the karma space. It is the thinking space where we can know the karma relationship. The human beings walk in the three-dimensional space while the birds fly in the four-dimensional space. The flight route of the birds can have knots. So the four-dimensional space is the knotted space. From the perspective of the three-dimensional space, we can only see the part of the tree above the ground. However, from the perspective of the four-dimensional space, we can see the tree roots under the ground. Based on the material changes in the mortal world, we can see through the phenomenon and detect the essence of things, the relationship between them, the interactive bridges, and the causes of the changes. We can also see through a certain phenomenon and find the future results. We can know the principle of quantitative and qualitative changes. We know how to achieve balance. We can find the truth out of the routine phenomena. We can find the thinking space of the laws. For instance, we can perceive the universal gravitation when seeing the apple falling to the ground. We can think about the movement rules and direction of the universe when seeing the vine growing in spirals. We can reach the knowledge about the terrestrial magnetism and ocean currents when we see the swirls formed by releasing the water out of the bathtub. We can know the function of the motion power when we see the kettle lid jumping as the water boils. We can perceive the irrigation and power generation when seeing the wind and tides. We can know about the disease and disease-spreading ways when we see the bacteria under the microscope. We can get the mystery of the genes when we see the different forms of the objects. We can conclude the life origin from the gene invariants and genetic features. We can know about a person's health and personality when see his complexion and face. We can predict a person's future success or failure when seeing his behaviors and listening to his words. We can see the rise and fall of a dynasty by observing the dedication of the government officials and the mentality of the civilians. Those living in the four-dimensional space include the greatest scientists such as Newton, Einstein, Stephen Hawking, Euclid, Copernicus, Mendel, Heisenberg, Kepler, Dalton, Röntgen, Mendeleev, Planck, Pasteur, the political leaders such as Washington, Mao Zedong, Constantine the Great, Peter the Great, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, Augustus, and Caesar, the musicians such as Beethoven, Handel, and Bach, the philosophers such as Aristotle, Plato, and Bacon. 五维空间阴阳两界间 5-dimensional between yin and yang space. It is the rim space and the crossing between the matters and antimatters, and between the space and the negative space. 3 types of people find it easy to enter this space. The first type is the specialists in a field. When one person is addicted to or reaches the peak in the study of one issue or one thing, he feels, though not very clearly, the existence of supermaterials. Sometimes he feels he can't find the interconnection bonds between the things in the actual world. Sometimes he feels that something happens in an incredible way. For instance, why the people who have dug the tombs of the Egyptian pharaoh die a natural death? Why did one of the twins feel worried at the same moment when his brother died from the traffic accident thousands of miles away? Why could the girl called Shani Devi, born in Delhi of India in 1926, tell exactly the things in her former cycle of life, which proved to be true? Why was the coffin of famous American actor Charles Cleveland, who died in 1899 and buried in Galveston of Texas, brought into the sea by the tides, floating 28 years and 3,000 kilometers before reaching his hometown, the Prince Edward Island? These things have made him feel that the things he used to study were much too trivial and insignificant. He still can't tell what's true and what's false when faced with the matters and antimatters. All things seem to the reality and the fantasy at the same time. If his flesh body dies now, his spiritual body will be in the state of puzzlement. Though his flesh body has died, the spiritual body of his can't find the way out and can only roam in the edgy place when the material world is connected with the non-material world. The second type is those who practice or improve himself blindly. Due to the wrong method, too much hurry, old age, or bad health, the spiritual body after the death of the flesh body can only drift in the connection place of the yin and yang worlds. The third type is those who feel like getting into the unnecessary end, or those who died suddenly at their golden age. Because they are not well prepared for death and still long for the material world, they are not willing to be brought to another world by the sudden death. Some of their wishes haven't been realized and they are reluctant to leave the material world. However, because their flesh bodies are dead, the spiritual bodies have no carrier and can only roam for a certain time in the connection space between yin and yang worlds. Some cases of spirit possession are caused by their spiritual bodies. The people who are not willing to die would stay in this space. In the rural areas, the monks or yin-yang masters will help to release the souls of the dead people. The ceremony is just to comfort them, encourage, and persuade them to enter the yin world and forget about the things in the yang world. 六维空间人间 dimensional space. The humans and this space is where the people having got out of the material world constraint live. When a person's belief is perfect innocent and he or she is not seduced by the worldly materials, they just look the same with the average people. But their inner part has been changed. They have known the negative universe is the origin of the matters. Everything in the three-dimensional world is simply the fantasy. The worldly people will get nothing even if they are busy working and struggling all the time. The people will end up in a dream and they are ignorant. The people in this space don't have to work to get something. They work for pleasure, not means of making a living. They have known the Holy Spirit, Buddhism, and Taoism. They know how to make use of the energy in the negative universe to serve them. Basically, they can make achievement by thinking about them. So they are free of the worries and live an unloaded life. Except for the human celestial beings whose flesh bodies are still alive because of their self-refinery and self-improvement, the few mages, Taoists, Christians, Buddhists, Muslims, and the believer of other regions can also enter this space.